can't baptize someone against their will. It's not valid. They have to freely choose it because they've been given the gift of faith, that they freely want to desire it.
2 seconds later.
Now, for an infant, of course, an infant can't freely desire baptism. He has no cognitive awareness of it, but the parents can desire it. They are the ones gifted with faith who bring the child for baptism.
It seems almost arbitrary.
I kid you not, I had to just record almost the entire thing because my mic was turned off. I'm irritated. Hey kids, love you, miss you. If you're not my kid, you're just here for a good time. That's what you're gonna get today, so enjoy. Now, I asked my subscribers before I put this video out on my next topic if I should make this one, which is exposing holes in infant baptism with the help of none other than Denzel Washington, or if I should do my modern religious, modern day Pharisees video, which lost by just a hair. I mean, it was super close, as you can see up on the survey. So don't worry, I'll be making that one too. Everyone in the comments either said number 2 or both. So that was Cope because their vote lost, but you're gonna love that one. It's gonna be magical. So wait for next time. Now, before we dive in, I wanna show you a clip. This is something that's bugged me probably since the moment I saw it 20 years ago. Was it 2004? Almost 21 years ago. It's insane. I'm getting that old. It'll happen to you guys. Don't worry. This is Denzel, and this is a movie called Man on Fire, which was intense, emotional, unforgettable, narrative gymnastics. Oh, that's right. During one of its most dramatic moments, they sneak a little narrative sleight of hand, a little slip that really doesn't add up. And it bothered me forever. And so I thought it was really funny when I saw Trent Horn do the exact same thing in a video, the same fudged exchange rate, while he's making the case for the very backwards practice of infant baptism. And before you short circuit, I'm going to explain the proper practice and how it was revealed if you stick around till the end. But let's have some fun. Do it, Denzel. Do it.
I'm listening. I'm listening, Daniel. I'm listening.
Here's what you're listening for. The villain is going to make an offer, something for something. Then he's going to up the stakes, something for not quite the same something I said. And then Creasy's going to repeat it back, not exactly the same way he said it. It makes no sense. Watch.
All right. I will give you a life for a life.
Whose life are you talking? What are you talking about? Whose life, Daniel? I want you.
I will give you her life for your life. And in exchange, I will get my life back.
What life? Whose life?
The girls. Peter's.
Peter's dead.
Sorry, should have said spoiler alert. That was kind of a big deal in the movie. So it's been 21 years. You've had long enough. So the offer is a life for a life. And then he throws in there, he wants to get his life back, which I think was just to use the L word again to confuse you because of what's coming up next. So Denzel Washington's smart, right? He's done this for a long time. He goes up against Mexican gang lords all the time. He wants verification of life. He wants proof of life so he doesn't get totally hosed in this deal. So that happens. We fast forward to this.
Yeah.
Creasy. She calls the bear Creasy Bear. Remember, I will give you her life for your life and the life of my brother.
Okay. Okay. I give you your brother, you give me the girl.
All right.
Where?
It sounds like he's negotiating, right? He's trimming the deal down. But then the movie goes on, and guess what happens at the end? It started with a life for a life. I probably won't have time to do graphics up here. And then he says, okay, your life for her life and the life of my brother. That's 1 for 2. I didn't do the hand signals right in the movie. 1 for 2. It went from 1 to 1 to 1 for 2. And then Creasy replies, okay, her life for your brother's life. 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 1. And they all just act like no big deal. That was a terrible negotiation. Here's what happens at the end. So it ends just like you thought it would, but the math is terrible. But what are this man on fire clips really showing us? This phenomenon of narrative ethical accounting, narrative sleight of hand in service of a dogmatic payoff, plot slippage, narrative gymnastics, maximum gravitas with a funded exchange rate. And today I want to talk about a parallel that might not be as obvious, but it's just as flawed. This argument about infant baptism in Catholic theology. Now, kids, in a few years, when you go on your missions, you're going to run into this a lot, if you haven't already. Trent Horn is one of the most capable and popular Catholic apologists on YouTube, but this really is an enlightening clip about how poorly thought out the doctrine is. So in this video, I'm going to address three main questions. Number one, is free will a prerequisite for entering the baptismal covenant? Number two, will God hold individuals accountable for the behavior and choices of others? And number three, what does a prophet of God say about baptism of infants versus what Common Core Christianity says about it? I'm also going to throw in some of my quintessential politically red-pilled and spiritually blue-pilled analogies so you can see how the church went woke long before the culture did. So, and I might actually have to put that in a second video in case this one goes too long. We'll see how it goes. So we're going to go to this first clip where Trent makes the argument that consent is a requirement for baptism. If you're able to give consent. If you're not, someone has to step in and give consent for you, which brings up interesting questions about what happens if someone doesn't step up and do this for you. Are you punished for the non-consent and non-intervention of others? It's a bit of a paradox, a bit of a pickle. Here we go.
You can't baptize someone against their will. It's not valid. They have to freely choose it because they've been given the gift of faith, that they freely want to desire it.
Yes, totally agree. Baptism is not enforceable without personal consent. Now, you can do it against someone's will. It's not whether it gets done or not. It's whether the baptism is enforceable. It's whether it's valid. But are there loopholes? According to Trent, there's a big one. So this is kind of true. Put an asterisk on it. Cross your fingers. Here comes the next part.
Now, for an infant, of course, an infant can't freely desire baptism. He has no cognitive awareness of it, but the parents can desire it. They are the ones gifted with faith who bring the child for baptism.
Did you see what just happened there? He's saying because they can't consent to it, we will force it on them. Is there a political analogy to forcing kids to do things against their consent when they're babies? I'll get back to that in a minute. Do you see the man on fire plot slippage there? A life for a life and the life of my brother. You cannot do it, but if I get the brother involved, then we're golden. It doesn't make sense. And here's the core issue. If baptism is not valid unless the individual consents, then we run into a real contradiction when it's applied to infants. The very thing that makes baptism enforceable is consent, and it isn't there for babies. So by this logic, infant baptism is not enforceable. If it's not enforceable, it's not valid. Remember, the foundational idea, Trent mentioned it comes through faith, and that can be the faith of any person, which is not true. The foundational idea behind baptism, it's an act of personal commitment, which is a choice to follow Christ, which is why it requires consent. This is why the first principle and ordinance of the gospel are faith, repentance, and baptism. It takes faith to make the choice to believe in and follow Jesus Christ. If it's not a choice, it can't be enforced. The whole plan of Jesus Christ is based around us being able to make our choice. So I'll give you an example to illustrate this, and hopefully I'll have time to draw it up, but it's hard enough to get these videos done as it is. So sorry. If person A over here, my screen's kind of small, person A over here can be saved due to a baptism that was chosen for them by a third party. So they get up to the pearly gates or wherever it is, and they say, hey, were you baptized? I go, absolutely, I was. When? Well, I was an infant. Oh, did you choose to be baptized? Well, someone chose for me. Okay, cool. Now person B walks up, and he is condemned for not getting baptized. Not only not getting it, but because of the inaction of a third party. Nobody was there to push their faith on me without my consent, and so therefore I was not baptized. And they go, okay, well, hell and damnation and the lake of fire are right over there. Sorry, better luck next time, sorry. One of these people is going to be saved and one of them is going to be damned despite neither having any say or utilizing their free will. And the person example B never had a chance to be baptized, maybe died as an infant, nobody gave it to him. So when they both get up there, you can argue that neither one gave their consent, neither one withheld their consent, one gets punished, one does not. This is why people cite logic and reason as their repose when they become atheists, is because of assertions like this that on their face do not make sense. They don't, not enforceable. Question number 2. Can God hold someone accountable for being left out of salvation because their parents or someone else didn't baptize them? Does this destroy God's ability to render fair judgment based on the idea of individual consent? I would argue it absolutely does.
So the parents renounce Satan on the child's behalf, receive baptism on behalf of their faith. That's why the church will not baptize children of parents who have no desire to raise a child to be Catholic. So if a pastor sees that the parents are only doing the baptism to please grandma, and they have no intention whatsoever of raising the child to be Catholic, then they cannot give the child baptism. There has to be at least a well-founded hope the child will be raised to be Catholic.
As Joe Biden would say, find the clip for this, that's a big effing deal. If baptism requires personal choice, consent, which he said that it did, and commitment, he's making the case here that even if the choice is being made for someone else, on behalf of someone else, they still want the commitment. So it's adding another layer of complexity and causality to an already fudged exchange rate. Baptizing someone else, especially without their consent, leads to a fatal breakdown of both the purpose and enforceability of the ordinance. Now, the issue here is not about whether baptism is important. It is, but when you make it a requirement for salvation, and allow one person to be saved based on a decision they didn't even make, you have a paradox. All right? If baptism is required for salvation, then salvation cannot depend on the will of another outside party, such as a parent or a guardian or someone who gives this faith to you by some magic means that can't be explained. God cannot hold a person accountable for salvation if the only way they can be saved is through the actions of someone else. It does not work. It messes up the whole space-time continuum.
The results of which could cause a chain reaction that would unravel the very fabric of the space-time continuum and destroy the entire universe. Granted, that's a worst-case scenario. The destruction might in fact be very localized, limited to merely our own galaxy.
Now, this narrative arithmetic in theology can be summarized like this. A person cannot be baptized without their will. One will from one individual equals one act of baptism. Hopefully I'll graph this up too. But a baby can be baptized by someone else's will, which is now a math of one act of baptism equals 0 will from the recipient plus 1 will from a third party. So you have 3 people with 2 wills. It doesn't equate. It doesn't add up. And it shifts the original rule of volition being required and adds a compensating variable. Let's call it that, which means the personal consent principle is unenforceable. I'm hitting this hard because this is important. If God can no longer use consent to bind, then he cannot use lack of third-party consent to condemn, period. Salvation is not a third-grade field trip with parental permission slips. It's just not the same thing. So now a person who was baptized by consent can go in, but the person who died as a child whose parents refused to sign the waiver cannot go in, can't go on the field trip to heaven. Do you remember Obama was president and started naming unconstitutional czars who'd give out Obamacare exemptions and waivers so the rules and penalties didn't apply to the people who held them? See, it was like 2008. It's a lifetime ago, kids. You'll have to read about it. But how is this different from parents or other adults and relatives or whomever being called as faith czars on behalf of the children? Don't worry, I do have more progressive analogies. That one kind of just came to me. It's a logical exception justified by a new relational variable. Fortunately, all of these baptisms will eventually be redone in God's due time. Why? Because if the math only works when you rewrite the terms, maybe the equation was never correct to begin with. That's the man on fire and Trent Horn baptism paradox. Is maximum gravitas with a funded exchange rate irritating in Hollywood? Absolutely. Still think about it. Like, what? Did they think we were stupid? Did they think we wouldn't notice? They think we just go along with it because it's entertainment? Maybe A, B, and C, all the above. But it's unacceptable in God's kingdom. It's bad theology. It doesn't make sense, and it can't be reconciled. In what other part of existence can you choose God for someone else? If you can't give Christ's redemption to someone else without their consent, without their willing volition, then any attempt to do so cannot be binding. So why did they try so hard to make this particular doctrine work? And furthermore, I have my blue pill, red pill question. If you're politically a red-pilled Christian, right, which the majority, the plurality are, it's changing in our demographics now, but they are, how do you feel about those who try to control behavior without your consent? Is this a Christian principle or is it a satanic principle? Which party or group of people are willing to violate consent on behalf of others for their good, ostensibly? Isn't that what socialism and communism are based on? How and why do these ideas creep into theology? Another blue pill and red pill analogy, and it's spiritually blue pilled or doctrinally blue pilled and politically red pilled, regards the adult and infant dichotomy. Now, you're not going to like this one. Who is trying to create different standards for each group based on their inability to provide consent? Don't we usually refer to those people, ironically, as pro-choice? Doesn't the government subsidize a company that makes that case that we call Planned Parenthood? Don't we have a complete industry built around this argument of who gets saved and who doesn't? Whether you like it or not, this infant baptism argument is a clump of cells exemption. And it didn't come from blue-haired atheists. It came from the cloth. Think about that. Clump of cells. He's making the argument that a clump of cells has no consent, so we just have to do it anyway.
You can't baptize someone against their will. It's not valid. Now, for an infant, of course, an infant can't freely desire baptism. He has no cognitive awareness of it, but the parents can desire it. They are the ones gifted with faith who bring the child for baptism.
And saved is a funny way of saying it, but really that's what it is. We will save them. Now, credit to them, they are trying to save the child, not trying to kill it, but the principle is the same. We will make this choice for them and it will be binding and permanent. Doesn't work. It's not the gospel. Now, I've been sitting on this one for a while, so I decided I'm going to break this video into 2 chunks, and so I'm going to end it here. But before I do, I want to give a shout out to Marvelous Wonder. I think there's a lot of really smart, brilliant LDS normies out there making great content, and this particular video just came out, and I felt it kind of aligned with the message I was doing, but it does something I didn't think of. I made this video, I sat on it for a long time, and I never really did what I usually think of, which is what's the inverse of this argument? If someone has the responsibility of baptizing you. And Trent made that case. In fairness to him, he goes, hey, look, we won't do it if there's a possibility this child won't be raised in the church.
So if a pastor sees that the parents are only doing the baptism to please grandma, and they have no intention whatsoever of raising the child to be Catholic, then they cannot give the child baptism.
Well, this brings up a whole nother slew of interesting theological and very serious questions about the responsibility and culpability of those who have the ability to act on your behalf for salvation and don't. What if the church decides not to baptize this child and they die, and then you've inadvertently condemned them to hell? What's up with that? Check out this question that Marvelous Wonder poses by Alex O'Connor, making this exact point. It's brilliant.
I mean, suppose that I, next week, am going to have a religious conversion. I'm going to have some kind of conversation. Or perhaps this conversation, maybe you're going to say something at the end of this conversation. I'm going to go home and I'm going to think, you know what, they were right. And I'm going to convert to Christianity and I'm going to repent of my sins and I'm going to be entered into the kingdom of God. But you presumably also believe that humans have libertarian free will. That's one of the reasons why evil exists in the first place, is that people are free to do what they like and God cannot control them, which means that any one of our crew here could walk over right now, take a big blunt object, whack me over the head and murder me. And if they were to do that right now, I would not go to the kingdom of heaven. And yet, if they hadn't done that, and an hour later, somebody had done it instead, then I get into heaven. And that's just because of somebody else's decision to do it now rather than later, right? In other words, the person who dictates there whether I get to go to heaven or I have to go to hell, it's not God, it's not me, but seemingly is the person who decides whether or not to whack me over the head with a blunt object. It seems almost arbitrary. I mean, death is very significant for an atheist, but for a Christian, death is just one thing that happens to you. It seems very arbitrary that this beautiful story of forgiveness and grace and charity and beauty just stops when you die, especially when you consider that your death is out of your hands. You don't get to choose when that happens, and somebody else can bring that on prematurely for you. And it doesn't matter what you would have done in the future. Now you're condemned to an eternity in hell.
This is an absolute banger. Now, it's much more articulate than I made it, but this is the inversion of the argument that I'm making here, is that there are far more reaching consequences of the fact that now you have to act and don't. You've condemned a person to hell, not whether or not you can save them on your behalf by making a decision that displaces their consent, but what if you have the ability to act and you don't? And this actually speaks to why this doctrine exists in the first place. I said this doctrine, this practice of people feeling compelled to act on behalf of someone who can't act for themselves because of their lack of understanding of the scope, breadth, and depth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's the point Alex makes later in this video, is death is such a pivotal part of this process that we act on their behalf. We say we have to step in. We don't know what's going to happen after this life, so it's up to us to baptize as many babies as we can in case, as a backstop, as an insurance policy, as a what if. And it's just a lack of understanding of how the gospel works. But the ramifications of this decision now that you've taken the responsibility to make, now where it's no longer up to God and Jesus Christ whether or not you're saved, where you end up, which kingdom you're in. It's up to you, the bystander who understands the Christian faith, to act on this person's behalf. So what happens now if you're the church, I'm going to play the clip again, and you decide not to baptize that child and you get it wrong? What happens if you're a semi-active Catholic and you don't baptize your baby? Well, it used to be, well, that baby's going to go to hell and it's your responsibility. Children, we are so fortunate and so privileged to have the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, to know the article of faith that men will be punished for their own sins and not for Adam's transgression. That your consent, your will, your diligence, your faithfulness, your desire to become one with Jesus Christ and God our Father is what will determine your placement. Surely you have outside influences. Surely some have better parents than others and better influences than others and better friends than others and better leaders than others. But it ultimately, like in life, mirroring our temporal life, you can do something about it. You can take action. And Jesus Christ has given us the ability to consent and the agency to wade through the waters of this temporal life so that we can maximize our ability, our competence, and our desire to follow his example and get back together with him. These two guys right here, oh boy, Cliff and Stuart. I'm sure Stuart didn't say much. Cliff probably did, but I've got videos. I'm going to link videos to Trent Horn. I'm going to link videos to Stuart and Cliff and everything I've got on these. Bravo, Alex, for a job well done. This question is unanswerable unless you have the privilege of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. If you're going to argue about seeds, you've got to compare fruits. And that's why the restored gospel is peak Christianity practiced in God as God intended. Love you, kids. Part 2 coming soon.
This is the way.